This is a new chapter of On the Brink. I'm Rosemary Armeo. I have two fantastic guests with me today. I'll introduce them in a second. And we are going to be talking today, not on a topic. We're going back to the original idea of the podcast. We're talking about news. It is not, however, topics that we normally have heard on radio, much in discussion, because we're filled with crises this day. So we're not going to be talking about the Middle East today or Ukraine. We're going to talk about China. We're going to talk about what happens in the world and in the United States if Trump gets elected. And if we get to it, we'll also talk a little bit about immigration. So the two guests who are with me today, I know them both. I'm very excited about their being here. Mary Anne Sharkey is the first kick-ass investigative reporter I ever worked with back in Cleveland. She is a long time, almost a legend in Ohio for her work on all kinds of news. And she's a political operative as well. She has written speeches for politicians. She's helped run their campaigns. She's awesome, very outspoken. And Mark Wittman was one of my favorite colleagues on the Roundtable, WAMC. His day job is as an investment banker. He's done that for more than 25 years. So we like to get him talking about money as well as politics. And we're going to get a chance today. I'm going to start with you, Mark. This was your idea that we talk about this because we haven't in a long time. Everyone seems worried about China. And in the United States, we're all mad at them. Why is that? What is there to fear in the United States about China?
Well, I think, Rosemary, the specific fear is the 24 million people in Taiwan currently living in freedom who will not be if China ever takes a run at them. I think that's obviously the biggest point of contention in our relationship. I actually think, though, it's pretty limited if you get beyond that, other than the fact that there are 1.4 billion people that live under a communist party a la 1984 that is brutally efficient in its suppression of those people. So if you ask me what our issue with China is, I would list those two in that order. The one thing I think it's important to note that will become important if we talk about what the US does if China ever does take a run at Taiwan is that I do not believe there is any evidence that China has geographical or geopolitical aspirations of note beyond Taiwan. You can leave aside World War II borders and whether or not it's an extra 100-mile border around China in the Red Sea. But I do think although there's a big fear of them as a boogeyman in the South Pacific, I actually think our two bones of contention are Taiwan and how they treat their own people.
Well, that's interesting. I think I want to disagree a bit right off the bat. I think that we have concerns about their nonchalance over human rights, not only in their own country, but in places like Africa and Latin America, where they have extended their reach. They don't care at all. They just want natural resources. And they've been very successful with that policy. Their trade is of great interest to us, both their influence in Asia and in how much we do with them. And Taiwan, I'm not sure why that is a bone of contention. Why is Taiwan so important to us? I don't get it. And you're right, though, like 70% of Americans right now think that we ought to be supporting Taiwan. I don't understand why. If it were reversed and Taiwan was a little section just off just separated by a little strip of water from the United States, we sure as heck would be wanting to take it over, manifest destiny and all that. You want to respond, or should we go on and get Mary Anne into the conversation?
Oh, let's. I don't disagree that in terms of trade and their marginal influence in some developing countries, they're a malignant force. But I think the significance of that pales in comparison to our opposition to them with respect to the treatment of Taiwan and their own people.
Well, why do we care? I will bring up Israel and Palestine. I have much the same feeling there. I don't understand our total all-in for Israel policy that comes from the 1940s, the same way as our support of Taiwan, and it's outdated. In the Middle East, we've become enemies needlessly of all the Arab people. And in the case of China, mainland is far more important strategically and in every other way that I can see to Taiwan. So why are we sticking with that policy? Mary Anne, I'm gonna jump in here and have you get into it.
Rosemary, I think that policy comes out of all the way back to Vietnam on the dominoes theory, that our nation has always felt that we had to help democracies where we can help democracies, or keep democracies where we can keep democracies. And certainly we have looked at that in terms of Israel and Taiwan. So I think, and of course, if we failed miserably in Vietnam, and I fear that, much of what you're saying, I'm going to split the baby here with you two. I fear very much that we're getting involved in countries where we don't really understand exactly what's going on. We're kind of fumbling our way around, and we're being the defense contractors of the world.
Right. That's exactly right. I say phooey to the idea of the domino theory. We use it when it is convenient to us. If it were really the principle we lived by, there would be no debate about Ukraine. We would be defending that democracy against Russia, which is a true enemy, and we ignore it when it's convenient to us. I think that you are right. We are fumbling around. That the United States is now and has been for some time, perhaps even before Obama, at a loss for a coherent policy, how to treat the rest of the world, whether to be the policeman of the world, who to support and who not. And it is a mess. You disagree?
Rosemary, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about Taiwan is I actually think the strategy of strategic ambiguity is going to lead to an unambiguous disaster with respect to our potential defense of Taiwan. I don't think it's been proven that China falls within the rubric of the domino theory. The military consequences of a conflict there, both to the United States if we became directly involved, and to any allies in the South Pacific who signed up to join us, would be excruciating. The economic costs to China and the United States of a conflict would be gruesome. And I think if you look at recent history with our inability to muster the political support for a war in Ukraine, as well as even all the way back to World War II, where I don't think people understood how much of the preparatory work that Roosevelt did helped us as a country jump into World War II once Pearl Harbor finally came.
Yep.
I think we need to admit to ourselves, perhaps without telling the Chinese of it, that there's no way the United States would become involved in a meaningful way in the defense of Taiwan and actually start to lose U.S. service people in that endeavor. I think it's time for a serious rethink about what we do. And I don't relish the prospect of 24 million people in Taiwan losing their freedoms. The Chinese government will go all 1984 on them. There's no doubt about that. Just look at the Uyghurs to find out what's going to happen to the Taiwanese. And sure, there will be a loss of a sense of security in the South Pacific amongst our allies, and we'll have to deal with that. But I think managing those consequences will be far easier than trying to basically manage the aftermath of a war that we start in and will inevitably lose our appetite for.
Our policy has been screwy from the very beginning. And by beginning, I mean probably 72 when Kissinger and Nixon opened up China. And they did it by selling Taiwan down the road. What they did, and this is, I've just been studying this, getting ready. It's so weird. They recognized the Communist Party as the one party, the one government of mainland China, but they acknowledged. See the difference? Recognize, acknowledge. As a word person, that blows my mind. They acknowledged Taiwan's status as being a part of a separate China. So how does that work? Exactly as you say, if this were to come down to defense of Taiwan. There is no defense of Taiwan. It is part of China. I don't think this is like Putin's claiming that Ukraine is not really Ukraine.
No, Taiwan is a vestige of unfinished business of a civil war. And frankly, if a bunch of Confederates were still hanging out in Key West, eventually the United States would shut that down one way or the other. This is different than taking over a sovereign nation. And by the way, the interesting thing about the genesis of this, if you look at it, it was Goldwater and others in the Senate who came up with this ambiguous policy towards Taiwan. And really, I think you can trace American sympathy for the Taiwanese all the way back to the days of the rise of the communists in 1949. I think we haven't quite gotten over that in terms of this policy. But I think what you've seen with our inability to maintain our intestinal fortitude with Ukraine makes it very clear to us and probably to the Chinese that we're never gonna gut it out if it comes to a long-term conflict with China over Taiwan.
That is Mark Wittman you're listening to, an investment banker and a longtime panelist, a regular panelist at WAMC. Now I'm going to turn to Mary Anne Sharkey, who is a government expert and a journalist from Ohio. If you had to set policy, set strategy, make recommendations on this in Washington, Mary Anne, what should be our stance and our strategy towards China?
Well, I think Mark is correct about the ambiguity. I'm not sure we could we're never going to get a consensus in this country to go defend Taiwan. It's just not going to happen. We're not going to put troops on the ground. We're not going to go over there and start bombing. It's just not going to happen. And I think the Chinese know that. And I think the longer we just sort of bluff our way through this, which is what we're doing. I believe I call it bluffing our way through it, because we're saying we're defending Taiwan, and Nancy Pelosi goes over there and causes an international incident just by her showing up. Of course, Nancy seems to do that.
She has that effect on people, doesn't she?
Yes, I love her dearly, but she does tend to just blow it up. They took great offense at her showing up. And at that point, she's like a former Speaker of the House. So that's how sensitive they are. But I agree. I don't think we can really ever spell out a policy where they become like a NATO country to us, where we're going to go in there and defend them.
You know, I'm not sure why that doesn't happen. When I was in high school, we thought of China as a paper tiger, but there was always that possibility that they would reach a certain point and become a power. And they have done that in our lifetime. They are there now. Their navy is bigger than ours. Their economic power rivals ours. Why do we have to set up as if they're another Russia that we have to be in a Cold War with? Why can't we be strategic allies? Work together to stop climate change or to slow down climate change, work together to keep peace in places like the Middle East. Why is that so impossible? Is it on us, Mark? Or Mary Anne, go ahead.
I think the fundamental issue here is the Chinese leadership doesn't like us. I mean, that's the reason they're getting along so well with Putin. We're the enemy of my enemy, and is my friend. Is the sort of the Putin and Chinese, Russia and China. So I think that a lot of it is just they just don't like us.
This is not a communist party that we've seen in other places. It actually has driven economic expansion. There's a middle class in China. Chinese people are living much as we do these days, and that's thanks to the Communist Party. So I'm not sure where this dislike stems from, except from tradition.
Oh, I think that's wrong, Rosemary. When you have a communist party that controls the way the Chinese do the freedoms of 1.4 billion people, I think one of the amazing things about the United States, if you look at us historically, is although lots of times we get it wrong, by and large, we have used our might to promote international values of human freedom and human rights. And with respect to China, I think it is our providence to take exception to the way the Communist Party treats their people. I think it's okay to ask, why the hell don't you hold an election?
I'm scowling. I'm saying pshaw to that. We don't care how they treat their people as long as they keep on buying iPhones and Jordan jeans from us. It's all money. We don't really care about the women in Afghanistan. That's not why we went in there. That's just the line we spew when our president is at the UN.
I think we care. I think we care. I do think we subordinate that concern oftentimes to economic concerns. But if you think about how the United States has taking exception, particularly to the treatment of the Uyghurs, and the fact that we have indeed taken measures that cost us in order to sanction China, I do think you see that we care, and I believe that we should, and I think we need. I think letting the Chinese sort of go about their business and continue to oppress their people without at least some objections would be wrong from the perspective of the United States. The one thing I would say is, although I think strategic ambiguity is an inherently flawed approach to the way we handle Taiwan, I think it's a lot easier for us in the US to say, well, there's no domino threat than it is for those in, say, Japan or the Philippines or South Korea. And I think our assistance that we provide to those countries militarily, both with our presence and in terms of arming them, I think is the right answer. I think we might as well use it for so long as it works as an implied threat to China should they take aim at Taiwan. But I think once the smoke settles and China has taken Taiwan, I think those in the South Pacific as our allies will feel better than they would otherwise about the situation because of the defensive posture that we've helped them establish.
Mm-hmm.
And we love our cheap goods. So
yeah.
As long as we get our cheap goods, we're very happy. Look at that. Temu, is that how you pronounce it? Temu?
Yes, Temu. Yes.
I mean, I'm getting barraged with their ads, and they keep trying to get me to download them. But as soon as they get in there, they have everything. They have all your contacts. They can get into your financial. I mean, you have to be very careful with this. It's very TikTok. The Chinese are very clever in terms of getting into our culture and into our country, into our finances, and into our politics.
Okay, I need to jump in here as the youth in this conversation, because you talk about the Chinese are clever, they're infiltrating, they're coming up with, no, we are inviting them. The fact is right. That we continue to buy the goods. We continue to want the stuff that they make. We continue to download the apps. And the whole belief that, I'm worried about someone tracking us. Well, I don't know. We're all on about 9 devices right now that they could get every single piece of information that they want from. But I mean, my big question here is with all of this is we talk about the human rights. We talk about all the different things. At the end of the day, green is the universal language. It comes down to it. Their economy would fail if we don't buy their goods, and our economy would fail if they didn't provide it. So is there really ever a chance that we're going to go to war with them? Or the fact is, if we buy stuff from them and they buy stuff from us, it would be, I know we use the term mutual assured destruction. Wouldn't a war with China be a mutual assured destruction for both of our economies? And Rosemary, if you want to start, you go right ahead.
See that out of the mouths of babes, who you were just listening to. Zach Grady, our producer, obviously knows more than just electronics. And I agree with that. It goes back to my point. Why can't we all just get along? I think that we're more allies with China than enemies. I have to make a correction. I refer to Jordan jeans. Obviously, I got Jordache jeans and Jordan the sneakers, both of which we like selling to China, confused in my passion. Any last words before we move on to our next topic, which is also a good one? All right, then let's take a short break and we'll be back to talk about what happens if Trump wins. Our Mayo on the Brink is brought to you by the Donna Frank team of Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Blake Realtors. That's a mouthful. But Donna is super impressive. We met when she worked at WAMC as a crack fundraiser. And since then, she's moved on to become also crack, a licensed real estate salesperson. Last year, she ranked as the top agent in the Capital Region. If you need honest answers about your real estate, check in with her. You are going to be impressed too, I promise. You can reach her at, this is the email, DonnaFed, DONAFED @gmail.com. The Apple Barn and Country Bake Shop on Route 7 in Vermont is closed right now. It is winter, you remember. They're closed until March 15th, but plans are already underway for a big spring reopening, new festivities. I understand mimosas may be involved, along with the donuts and pies that they're famous for, the Apple Barn. So keep an eye on their website. It is theapplebarn, all one word, .com. You'll hear and see announcements there. Karin's Place, Karin, is a gorgeous retreat. I've been there and visited on 22 acres out in Vermont, rural Vermont. It's available for rental for everything from weddings and family reunions to corporate conferences. It's close to city centers around here, but you would think you were in another country. It's beautiful. Go to www.karinsplacevt.com. In a galaxy pretty close by and in a time pretty near us, Trump is the president of the United States again. Imagine that. And tell me, I'm talking to both Mark Wittman, a co-panelist of mine for years on WAMC, and to Mary Anne Sharkey, a former colleague at the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Tell me how you see reaction from many people, I think I'm included in that for sure, who don't want Trump ever to be in that Oval Office again. How should we be preparing now, and what should we be doing then? Mary Anne, why don't you take domestically? How should local politicians, governors, Democrats, and civil organizations be responding?
Well, I mean, this is like apocalypse now to me. Thinking about a second term for Trump. But I think we really have to work on the grassroots level. We have to elect, members of Congress who are not going to go along with Trump. We have to look at our governors. We have to work very hard. The Democrats have not been as good as Republicans. Democrats used to excel at grassroots campaigns, used to excel at getting people elected from the local school board on up. Christian Coalition came in and started electing people to school boards and city councils, and then they started going after Congress, and the Democrats were asleep at the switch. I would hope that this would be a giant wake-up call for all those young people who are not voting, for the minorities who've been sitting these elections out, because Trump does not have a majority of this country. He can barely get past 40%. And as long as he can, and that means 60% of this country is probably never going to support Donald Trump. And that 60% has to be wakened up. They have to wake up.
Mm-hmm. You're still talking about preventing him from winning, though, and that may already be out of our hands.
I'm talking about getting members into Congress, getting members, electing people to school boards, Congress, governor's offices. They have to stop him. They have to stop him in his tracks. And you certainly can't turn over Congress to Trump. If you turn over Congress to Trump, God forbid what's going to happen to this country.
Yeah. So you're talking about resistance, like we've never seen before.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Resistance. We have to elect people in the governor's offices. We have to elect mayors. We have to elect, most importantly, members of Congress in the Senate and House of Representatives, who are not going to go along with Trump.
Mary Anne, where do you see the biggest danger in a new Trump administration? Election integrity, or just a plain old attack on democracy?
They've already shown that they're trying everything. I mean, I know in the state after state, we're seeing this happen, certainly in Ohio, where they're trying to restrict people in terms of who gets to vote. They're tightening all the restrictions, voter ID. You have to register 30, 60, 90 days in advance instead of being able to walk up and do it online or do it 5 days ahead. Ohio used to have, you used to be able to register and vote on the same day. That's all been taken away. This is all to discourage, getting people, certainly people out of college campuses, getting people in minority communities to vote. So they're doing everything they can to suppress the vote, everything they've been able to do in terms of thinking about suppressed vote. So that, in terms of that, yes, that's a great concern. And we have secretaries of state in these different states who Republicans are electing because they want the chief election officer to be Republicans and to help suppress the vote.
We've seen Trump's tactics, the MAGA tactics, work exceedingly well in your state, in Ohio.
Exceedingly well, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ohio has become firmly more red than I've ever seen it.
Well, in Ohio, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama won. And yet we're becoming more and more red. And that's partly due to redistricting, and it's partly due to the suppression of the vote.
Right. I think redistricting is a big topic to get into in
yes.
in a new Trump world. But I don't know how to fix it. I mean, the Supreme Court has not been cooperative. The political parties have not been cooperative. There is no fairness in redistricting.
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court did show some backbone in Georgia on redistricting. True. So,
or Alabama.
In Alabama, correct.
Yeah.
So, and there is, we'll see what this U.S. Supreme Court does, because I'm still not convinced that they're going to roll over for Trump. They're showing some backbone, which is good.
Yeah, it is good. It's our only hope, I've come to think.
Yes.
Right. Mark, take this conversation international. Talk about NATO. Talk about Ukraine. Oh my goodness, we could do Taiwan. Trump in Taiwan would be interesting. What do you think? What's the big danger?
I'm happy to do that, Rosemary. But one thing I want to do, if I may, first is keep it very personal. On the day after Trump wins, most of the folks we know are going to walk around talking about the country that they're going to move to, but none of us are going to do it. So I think we need to stop and think personally, if it were to happen, what we would do. I think people need to think long and hard about their media diet and how to avoid being embroiled in the cycle of watching 2 daily offensive tweets out of Trump's fingers. I also think you need to emphasize, psychologists tell us that small acts of kindness for others do really help your mood. I think that's important. And I think particularly if you consider those acts of kindness as perhaps directed towards an offset of Trump's policies in terms of where you give your time and your money, I think that may be very helpful to people personally. On the international, and one more thing, actually, speaking of resistance, I think that people need to be very careful and make sure that every time they get a chance, even if it's the library board, they vote. Because we've seen the influence that Trump has and how it filters down to sort of all levels of our culture. And I think every time the ballot box is open, we need to be there. And we also need to be thinking about the fact that voting for a Republican when Trump's in power is very dangerous, because it only takes a scratch or a bite from Trump, and they'll become too many of them become the Walking Dead, and help him search in his search for brains. And I think we need to be very careful about that if Trump were indeed to come to power. Internationally, I think it'll be an incredibly destabilizing force. Even if, for instance, NATO wants to persist in defending Ukraine without us, what Trump has said about our unwillingness to come to the aid of NATO will loom large. And just ask the ghost of Harry Kissinger about bombing Cambodia, and ask Putin what he will think about doing to Poland if the United States is no longer standing behind NATO. He's going to blow up a couple roads and ask the question of NATO, what happens now that the U.S. isn't there to help you out? And in the South, go ahead.
No, I'm going to just support that. I think one of the biggest dangers of a second Trump administration is the dissolution of NATO. The Congress just passed a law that kind of limits the president's ability to dissolve the NATO alliance. It will require an act of Congress, but there's stuff he can do even if he can't coerce all the Congress into going with him. He could pull back, for example, the Supreme Commander, who since Eisenhower has always been an American. He could limit our involvement and our readiness so that he doesn't even have to say, oh, I'm not going to follow the directive anymore. He'll just say, oh, we don't have troops. Oh, we're not ready, because the United States not being an active partner in NATO would doom the organization. And from there,
I think that law, Rosemary, is not worth the paper it's written on. The president can sit on their hands and effectively end our participation in NATO. And the dangerous thing that's going to happen in Europe and in the South Pacific is those without a nuclear deterrent, or those with a nuclear deterrent like the UK that depends on sharing a stockpile with the United States,
Right.
are going to go shore up their own.
Right.
And in Europe, that's going to present a renewed danger. And specifically in the South Pacific, if you're Japan or South Korea, you have to think long and hard about substituting for the United States as nuclear deterrent. And as you do, even though it's defensive, that's going to be a hard sell that this is only defensive when the South Koreans call up the North Koreans and say, don't worry, this is only on defense. I think the destabilizing effect on the world order will be tremendous and frankly, perhaps even more costly than 4 years domestically of Trump. The other thing I worry about, by the way, domestically is taxes will remain low, social spending will be constrained, and tariffs will be high. Inflation will once again raise its head, perhaps not to the heights that we saw, but I think you'll see meaningful inflation rear its head if Trump gets anything near what he wants on tariffs. And I'm particularly worried because Jerome Powell's term ends in May of 26. And there's a risk that Trump promotes as Fed chair somebody who will basically print money to try and help the United States get out of its ever-looming debt less expensively. And that, again, will reinforce the inflationary trend that is likely to pick up under a Trump administration. So
the worries, if we're going to list all the worries, we can go beyond that too, Mark. For one thing, with Trump in office, we've got a very old Supreme Court. He could get more appointees. And the influence of those appointees goes on intergenerationally. It's already up to the end of my lifetime with the rigged court he has now. It would extend even further if he gets more. Ukraine is toast. Putin would be in there the next day, and that would have two effects, I think. Eastern Europe is immediately on war footing and endangered, and Russia is embroiled in an interminable war because the Ukrainians will go underground. The fight will become a guerrilla warfare. And we've just heard this past week about new Russian efforts to put nuclear weapons into space. So the danger to the world of this is just extraordinary. As for China, I think that goes to China because Russia and China will have they're crafting the new world order. If the old NATO alliance goes, then everything is up for grabs. It's so depressing.
Yeah, look, Rosemary, it is depressing, but in my role as a financial advisor, I spend a lot of time with clients talking to them about planning for things like, if the crisis of the financial crisis appears again, are you protected? And I think it's incumbent upon people to think today, whether you're in an individual or a civic organization or in a political organization, you need to think about, if you wake up and Trump's president, you need to have the maturity today of putting in place a plan to cover yourself for that and to do the best we can under those circumstances.
Mary Anne, you wanted to jump in there. Please do.
Well, let's even start from what he's going to do on day one.
He's only going to be a dictator that day.
Yeah, he's going to be a dictator then. That's his day to be a dictator. That's his day to go after all of his enemies. That's the day we're going to see, General Milley and all of these other folks who have been putting up a honorable resistance, who are going to, have to face the music with him. I don't know what he plans to do.
Watch out, Taylor Swift.
And not only that, all the civil servants are going to be fired and replaced with loyalists. I mean, it's breathtaking.
The end to the department.
From day one.
The end to the Department of Education. The end to the IRS.
Right. Environmental.
The
environmental laws
toast.
will be repealed. They're toast. Yes.
Okay, so I need to jump in here once again.
This is Zach, the young person again.
No, and I have a question, because we're living in this hypothetical world, but we are forgetting one thing, that this is the oldest presidential election in the history of presidential elections, only breaking the record by 4 years, which was set by, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Yes. So the real question here, and this is specific, and I have my opinions on this, and I think I'm going to be correct ultimately in his selection. But in this hypothetical Star Wars world that we're living in, who's number two, and how likely is number two going to be the person who finishes this term and not Agent Orange?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't see how Joe Biden can dump Kamala Harris. Well, I've thought for a long time that was a wise move. He cannot. It's politically untenable.
Well, if he picks Taylor Swift, then we're fine.
Or The Rock.
He's got too many Vince McMahon ties. I don't know.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
We don't
He's
know
compromised now too.
we don't know how long he'll be in good graces until he's canceled. But no, I asked seriously, and Mark, I ask you first, and then Mary Anne as well. You know, I think it's going to be Stefanik. I ultimately think that Stefanik is the pick. I think that was the reason why she's been in the background, why she hasn't been a big part of the Speaker of the House conversations, of any of the big power and Republican, because Trump didn't want her to get dirtied. I think that she provides him with New York, a state that he's still upset that he didn't win his own home state. I don't think they'll win, but it gives him an advantage there. So I think Stefanik is the go-to on that one. But Mark, I go with you. Who would be the number two? And is it scarier to have Trump as our president or whoever he selects as his vice president if he doesn't make it through 4 years?
I first of all, I respect the question. I think if you look at actuarial tables, either of these guys will make it for the next 5 years. But let's take your assertion that they don't. I think, frankly, Trump has a unique charisma, which makes him more potent than even, say, his twin without that charisma. I don't think Stefanik's his twin. I think Stefanik is, and frankly, any other who would become his vice president have adapted themselves to please Trump, and I think in his absence, they could only moderate from there. So I don't worry about them as much as I worry about Trump. Personally, that's my view, and I think Harris, she's a beneficiary of machine politics in California. She's not proven herself an adroit politician, but I don't fear her and the administration that would be around her running this country if that were to come to pass.
Mary Anne, what do you think?
Well, I think Trump will select someone who will be another potted plant like Pence. He has no intention of having anyone with a sparkling personality or somebody's going to upstage him at any events. He's going to always have to be the star of the show, no matter what. I don't know. I don't have any insight. Trump is such a wild card. I have no idea. I mean, the other person that is mentioned a lot is J.D. Vance from Ohio.
Your guy.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, J.D. Vance. And I don't know how much your listeners have paid attention to him or not, but he's a real toady for Trump. And even though he has this Ivy League education and he wrote a best-selling book and movie, he has really gone inside out to try to become Trump. I don't think anybody with star power is probably going to be selected by Trump. I just don't think he wants anyone with star power. Kamala Harris, she's fine. I mean, she doesn't have a lot of personality. She has not clicked with voters. She's a dull speaker, but I feel comfortable with her. If something happened to Joe Biden, I don't think she would do anything. I mean, I think she would be a very, decent president. Maybe not a great president, but I think she would certainly do a decent job.
Well, let me just say that I think that any of the people that we've been talking about, Stefanik, Vance, or Harris, would be an improvement over Trump, any of them. I think that Zach is right. Stefanik looks to me like the favorite right now. And she's boring and dull, but she has done that on purpose. She just tamps herself down. She has almost an identical the biography to Vance. She also is Ivy League educated. She She started out as a moderate. She's wildly popular in her upstate district. I'm not sure that even with her, Trump would carry New York. She certainly would get no votes downstate in New York City area. But in office, if she were suddenly thrust, if the actuarial tables are wrong, Mark, if she was thrust into the office, I think she would be competent. She'd be conservative and awful in almost every way, but she wouldn't have that berserk quality that Trump does. So,
well, I think politically speaking, Rosemary, if she can't deliver New York and Vance and Ohio's already sewn up, so that makes Vance not particularly helpful to Trump. You got to go somewhere where he needs votes. I mean, this is the traditional role of your vice presidential candidate, is somebody who can win a state you would normally win,
or a constituency as Penn
right,
State.
or a strong constituency. So I don't know what either one, Stefanik or Vance, really do for Trump, politically speaking. And this is going to be a squeaker of a race. So it really will matter politically who you select to be your vice presidential candidate.
Well, that's an interesting question you raised there, Zach. What do you think after listening to us?
Well, I mean, I look back on it, and I do agree that no matter who he picks necessarily, I don't think he wins New York, because ultimately New York is determined by New York City. But I think Stefanik may give him a fighting chance. She has gotten some national attention with the school presidents and her interrogation on
the attack on universities. Yes.
But look, I go back to it, and maybe I am naive. Maybe I'm living in pop culture. Maybe I'm living in a world that doesn't exist. But then again, we have elected The Apprentice as our president. So clearly pop culture does play. I mean, Ronald Reagan was an actor and became president. But if you look at the key numbers, the key demographics, the things that Barack Obama won in 2008 and 2012, and the things that Hillary Clinton did not win in 2016, which gave Trump power, these are all demographics that ultimately probably could be swayed by someone who sings about teardrops on her guitar and her tight end Super Bowl boyfriend. Because the youth will come out for Taylor if she does endorse Biden. And if Trump is stupid enough to take a shot at her on Twitter, that is where the world of the 18-year-old Taylor Swift fan lives, and he will not be able to survive. Even as great as he is on Truth and Twitter and all those things, the power of a teenage girl and 140 characters, I think, is something he does not want to deal with.
Well, that's an interesting wrap up, that we're in the hands of a demographic that is so easily swayed. It scares me. If I'm to sum up what we said here today.
No, hold on. No, it's not so easily. That's the problem. It's not so easily swayed. And Hillary Clinton thought in 2016 it could be easily swayed. And she thought in 2016 that all of the youth that was motivated and inspired and came out to vote for Barack Obama on 2 occasions, that she would just carry no problem. And we would all come out and just, Barack endorsed you, so we're going to endorse you. And she lost because of that. The youth was not behind her. The colleges were not behind her.
Zach, what you're arguing is that if Taylor endorses Biden, he wins. And I'm not sure that's true either.
No, I'm not endorsing that. I'm saying to stop placating the youth as if that it's a meaningless demographic, because it is a demographic that determined 2016. It was one that Hillary Clinton
Mary Anne, school this child. We discount them because they do not freaking vote.
We do not vote except for in 2008 and 2012, when we voted the first African-American president in the history of this country.
Yes, and so did the black vote. There was a gigantic,
Hillary Clinton did not get.
That massive black vote for Obama, which Hillary did not get. Correct. Hillary failed to get the minority vote.
Yeah. Ascribing this to the youth vote, I don't know.
No, what I'm saying is that in this situation, the youth, the minorities, they're ignored. But we're on pace where the youth and minorities will outpace the boomers. There'll be more minorities than there will be just Caucasian individuals. But yet We still want to elect octogenarians. And just 2 episodes ago, when someone brought up AOC, someone was like, oh no, not her time. She's got to wait in line. For what? To be 80?
Well, I think that the youth vote, the underage, younger age voters already outnumber the old timers. The problem is they exist. They don't vote. The old people vote. So that's the real problem. We have to wrap this up, I'm afraid. This went really well, and we did not get, however, to immigration. So I need to invite both of you back, and you're on the air now, so please commit that you'll come back, and we'll do part 2 of this. Okay?
I'd be happy to. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, Rosemary. It was great
excellent.
talking to you after all these years.
I know, I agree. And Mark, how about you? You'll come back too?
I will come back anytime you ask, Rosemary. Be a
All
delight.
right. That's what I like to hear. I love our sponsors, and I want to tell you about 2 more of them. One is Pine Valley Press of Williamstown, Mass. It was founded way back in 1979. Go here. I'll give you their website in a second. You can find here and even order the music of David Keckley. He is the composer who put together those segments that you hear at the beginning, the end, and in the intervals in our podcast. We get numerous comments, usually almost always compliments about that music. That's Pine Valley Press, all one word, .com. Check it out. And one of our first sponsors, still with us, has been Peacock Pots Pottery. That's a tongue twister for me. They offer the unique work of their founder, who is engineer turned artist, Ona Papagiorgio. You can check out the pictures of what she is capable of. It's really remarkable. At, again, all one word, peacockpots.com. Please subscribe to an Armeo on the Brink. This doesn't cost anything, and it really helps us out a lot. You can just go to the podcast platform of your choice and follow their instructions to subscribe or follow or like and rate us. The more you do that, the more sponsors that we can end up getting. And that gives us a chance to do more and more extensive programming, which I would really like. I think you would like it too. I also have to tell you about something new we have coming on later this month, an On the Brink website. This is a place where you will be able to interact with me and our guest panelists, get background information on the issues and the topics that we bring up. You can make suggestions, render complaints even. You can hear my rants, and I have a lot of opinions, you know. A weekly podcast just can't contain them all. So watch out for our upcoming website.